can't just deal with the commandments without talking about God's law in general. We will talk about it um, from the point of view as how God as creator has made his laws written within our hearts. And the church has called that place where he has written it the deepermost conscience and the sanctuary where God meets man face to face in the secrecy of our souls. So we try to fight against the law, and again, somehow man has managed to fight against the law of gravity, and thus he thinks that he knows how to fight against everything else. But when you think about it, yeah, the laws that are written actually informs the way that we live. For those who have gone up to the moon, even for the astronauts, the weightlessness creates a lot of problems in the body because somehow the Lord God, in His wisdom, has made us what we are, dependent and on the laws that we have. And thus, even in the moon, when they were up there in space, they have to, in a sense, learn to cope with that, which is unnatural, so that they can learn, and when they come back to Earth, they are able to live normally. The milieu that we live in is what God has created us. And because it is in its own beauty and its own orderliness and its own harmony, to believe in the theory of everything happening from a bang and out of chance is completely unreasonable. Because it takes a lot of coincidences to be able to let it become so perfect at one go. So when we talk about God's law, we use the word what we call natural law, yeah? But this natural law is to be distinguished from the laws of nature, yeah? So natural law has a more specific emphasis in the moral law that is written deep within our hearts. Of course, if you want to put laws of nature subsumed under natural law, I think that can be also a case of argument because God is the creator of all these laws, yeah? By the word law, we mean the harmony or the principle that he creates it under. And he has created it in such a way that the laws of nature, as how we understand in the laws of physics, in the laws of math, and in the laws of every other things, also then, if they are present already in nature, there must be some sort of law that is written within our hearts. And morality is the way to want to do good. And the way that we reason this goodness cannot be based on our own arbitrary feelings, but it has to be based on the reasoning on someone who is really good in himself, and that is who God is. And man, because we are intelligent beings, our way of acting cannot be based on instinct, but be definitely based on reason, or rather has to be guided by reason, not based on reason. And the reason has a higher reasoning power or a higher reasoning source of reference, who is the divine wisdom in God. Morality ultimately has God as its reference point. We love our neighbor because God has loved us first. And because God has loved us human beings into existence, that's why we also need to love each other into existence in honoring each other's existence as equal persons in dignity. So, whether we are Christians or not, because God is one and the creator of all, this law, this natural law, is universal. It doesn't become more real for Christians, and thus non Christians don't observe the law in that sense. That's why the laws of abortion, for example, or the sin of abortion is universal in itself, yeah. Because you're going out against our very nature in murdering someone who is truly alive. For us, we'll call it grave mortal sin. But for the others, it's no less sinful, right? In itself, because it is murder, period. We may not call it sin for a non believer, but it is something evil in itself. So even those who are without understanding, meaning we define them by infants in canonical law, we mean those which are below the age of 7, before they start reasoning as how you and I can, reason as an adult. young children, of course, those which are babies, and those who, because of development or because of many reasons, don't have the mental capacity for whatever reason, they all have the same rights as natural law because every one of them is created in God's image and likeness. The image and likeness is based on the dignity of the soul. So the soul is not just some spiritual thing, it is the what we call the life force that animates the physical body that we have. So the soul and the body are one entity, one person. So all must obey the natural law unless they cannot reason. And thus we have this thing that for those who cannot reason, cannot really, in that sense, sin, because they cannot willfully choose to do evil. But that must be, in a sense, proven in itself, yeah? So natural law is the basis for all civil law, but it is actually definitely superior to civil law because civil law is man-made. Natural law is divine. It comes from God. And this divine law, this what we call the natural law, has got written and unwritten components. The written components are what we call the explicit ones, which are codified, especially in the Ten Commandments. And you will notice that the Ten Commandments are in themselves, universal in many ways. And conscience is this mysterious thing called conscience, is a practical moral judgment. We have this conscience to judge our actions. By practical, it means the things that we actually do, not just things that we imagine will happen. So in a sense, we use it to to inform our actions, be it through thoughts, be it through words, be it through deeds. And thus, this intellect, this conscience needs to be formed because we use reason. It needs to be formed properly as to think in the right way. There are wrong ways of thinking. To have the right reference point because there are wrong reference points of measure. Just like when we look at Trump, do we agree in the way that he reasoned? But many people do and accept that reason. Look at the sacking of the Capitol and whatever it is. Yeah, Trump in itself was, and in his own words, he was not really sorry in that sense, right? So, and many people who have stormed the Capitol building also felt that they are doing something which is completely within their rights. Why did they think that way? Because of their premise of reasoning. And we know in one way or another, that form of reasoning can be less than ideal and maybe even termed defective.